And now behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me. And I have seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, and you may bring forth my people, the sons of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the sons of Israel out of Egypt, he said. But I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you, that I have sent you. When you have brought forth the people of Israel, you shall serve God upon this mountain. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Today's speaker is Dr. Barbee.
Good morning.
Morning.
Well, as I hope you recall, this year teachers are giving a series of chapel talks on the virtues, and today it's my privilege to talk about the virtue of hope. On Friday, I told my African American literature class that I was considering beginning the chapel talk by reciting a poem and then analyzing the poem, and they very quickly and very firmly told me that this would be a terrible idea. One student telling me, Dr. Barbee, nobody wants to hear poetry at 8 a.m. So, the message received, I'm not going to talk about poetry. Not much. I'm not going to recite Emily Dickinson's poem, Hope is the Thing with Feathers, which is a very lovely poem that everybody should read. And I'm not going to unpack or analyze her choice to describe hope as a little bird that sits inside us and sings to us, offering us nothing but help and encouragement, although it is a very fine image for what hope is. All right, so what is hope? Hope is the anticipation of a positive or desired outcome. And on the surface, it sounds a lot like positivity, having a positive mindset. But hope is not mere positivity. Hope requires imagination and perseverance and patience. As St. Paul writes in his epistle to the Romans, hope that is seen is not hope, for who hopes for what is seen? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. That is to say, hope in life helps us envision and work towards a goal that seems unreachable and sustains us in the face of setback and disappointment. Like Dickinson's little bird, hope sings the loudest when times are bad. Today is Martin Luther King Day, and Martin Luther King is most often associated with the virtues of faith and love. However, I think that through his example, we can see how faith, hope, and love interconnect with each other and depend on each other. And we can see the awesome power that hope has to sustain us through challenges and hard times. Now, many of you will be familiar with his most famous speech, his I Have a Dream speech, which is from the 1963 March on Washington. What I want to do today is situate that speech in its historical context and summarize what 1963 was like for Martin Luther King. As I do so, I want you to pay attention to how tumultuous that year was and how much the bad outweighed the good. January 1963, Martin Luther King was somewhat defeated and demoralized. He had recently walked away from a civil rights campaign in Albany, Georgia, which had fizzled out without achieving any of its goals. He spent the first part of the year leading civil rights activists in Birmingham, Alabama. Working out of the historic 16th Street Baptist Church, King and his allies led a peaceful effort to integrate businesses and public spaces. Throughout this struggle, King and the other protesters had to contend with white supremacists who regularly harassed them, attacked them, and even bombed the places they lived and gathered. And they faced a police force which unleashed batons, fire hoses, and dogs, and even a tank on peaceful protesters. Dr. King and thousands of other people were arrested. And although Martin Luther King had the support of local African-American clergy, statewide church leadership, every Christian denomination, publicly criticized him and told him to leave. Got massive pushback from other church leaders. Now, despite violent resistance, the Birmingham movement achieved some of its goals, and Dr. King was able to leave Birmingham in May, feeling a little more confident. In early June, this is another positive thing, President John F. Kennedy finally came around to publicly supporting civil rights legislation, and on June 11th, he gave a nationally televised address calling on Congress to produce a sweeping civil rights bill. So things were starting to get better. But then the very next night, a man named Medgar Evers was assassinated. Medgar Evers was the leader of the Mississippi chapter of the NAACP. He'd been instrumental in integrating Ole Miss, but he was shot by a white supremacist as he was walking home to his wife and children. So King has to have been devastated, but he kept going. In August, after years of planning, King and his associates, his allies, staged the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedoms. Around 250,000 people marched to the National Mall and peacefully called for freedom and equality. If you watch or listen to King's I Have a Dream speech, you can hear how inspired and inspiring and hopeful he was. But then, just a few weeks later, in September, the historic 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, out of which King had been working earlier in the year, was bombed. The bomb tore a hole in the church and took the lives of 4 middle school-age girls. And then a few months later, John Kennedy, who had finally come around to publicly supporting civil rights, was also killed. It's kind of dark, I know. But if you were paying attention, you'll notice, right? 1963, Martin Luther King enjoyed victories, but overall it was a very hard year, full of setbacks and challenges. And throughout all of it in his private life, he was hounded, followed by police, threatened by white supremacists, and jailed over and over and over again. But he pressed on, he never gave up, and he never lost sight of a vision for a more inclusive and more tolerant and more equitable America. And it's worth remembering, right, this is just 1 year in his 13 years as a national civil rights leader. 13 years that he dealt with these challenges, but never lost sight of the goal. In 1968, King told his followers that they, quote, must accept finite disappointment but never lose infinite hope. They needed to know that the path forward was going to be hard and there would be setbacks, but those losses would be finite, they would end, they would be temporary. Hope which sustains, is infinite, and they had to hold on to it. Okay, but how? How could Martin Luther King hold on to hope for so long and in the face of so much violent resistance? How could he continue to inspire hope in others then and even now, nearly 60 years after his death? 2 reasons. First, King could hold on to hope and provide hope to others because of his faith. His faith gave him the confidence and courage to continue on, and I would argue through the centering power of prayer and the uplifting power of communal worship, he was able to stay focused and motivated. And it's important to note, Martin Luther King's faith was not limited to faith in God. He had a powerful faith in his fellow human beings and the United States as a nation. Second, Martin Luther King had hope because he had love, a deep Christian love, a radically inclusive and empathetic love. King persisted he had hope because he knew that there was good in all of God's children and that through hard work we could overcome any challenge. So faith and love gave him purpose and helped him stay centered and motivated as he weathered challenge after challenge. Faith and love enabled him to hold on to infinite hope in the face of finite defeat, and this hope sustained him even in his lowest moments. I want to end just by thinking about the lessons we can take from this, right? The lessons we can take. Martin Luther King Day is obviously an occasion to think about and celebrate the great diversity of the United States, to remember that change can happen not violently and through consensus. But it's also a great day to think about Martin Luther King's life and think about what it takes to face any challenge that comes your way, what it takes to hold on to hope in the face of setbacks. It's highly unlikely that any of us will ever experience the kinds of challenges or setbacks or fears that Martin Luther King faced. However, in the course of your life, you will face tremendous challenges and experience loss and sorrow. There will be times when you feel crushed and defeated, when you feel hopeless and ready to give up. Sometimes these setbacks will be personal, sometimes they'll be communal. Our current moment is not as tumultuous as the 1960s, but the United States is riven by partisan rancor and divide. And we're seeing, if you watch the news, sort of very divided America. We have military and federal agents patrolling some of our cities. It's a scary time. It can feel very hopeless. And this is happening around the world. Other countries are facing even more severe existential threats. This is all very heavy. It's all very heavy and serious. But I want to remind you and ask you to remember that even in the darkest moments, you will be able to find hope. Like Dickinson's little bird, the thing with feathers that perches in our soul, or just like a bird singing at daybreak on a cold winter day, hope will be there to welcome you and awaken you and inspire you. You might lose sight of it or have trouble hearing it song over the harsh wind, but it will be there. It will be there. Faith, your faith in God, your faith in yourself, and your faith in your fellow human beings. And it will be there in love, the love you receive and the love you give to others. Even on your birthday, through faith and love, you will be able to find hope again. Thank you.